that one up. Phone. Good morning, buddy. Just getting all set up here. Alright, that is now up. And then we just need to grab this link. Share, copy. Alright, good morning. Alright. Good morning. Get started with my morning studies, right? Nice and sunny out behind me. Should be a nice day, I think. Alright, let's review over here. Got my reference up. Draw this fellow here. All right. Working on our folds today. Let's see, up, over, down, directly this way. Pads come down. All right. Good morning over there on Kick. How's it going? Starting up some, looks like my camera might be a little janky over there. I tend to use my older MacBook as the streaming computer, and sometimes it gets in a mood. It seemed like it was fine before I started, but now it's a little goofy over there sometimes. I like to start the morning off with some studies, so I don't always come on for them depending on how busy I am, but pretty much every day I'm doing this first thing in the morning. Alright, I do have enough room for the shoes, that's good. I was worried about that. Let's see, what do the shoes look like? Go, cuts back, comes down. How am I flowing and glowing, huh? Hello over there on Kick, bunch of people. Oh, nice of you to bring some people over. Flowing and glowing. Am I glowing? It's bright first thing. Well, it's not that first thing anymore. It's 9 o'clock now, but got some morning sun behind me. And a sleepy dog off to the side. This is my morning study, so I usually get up and spend about an hour working on some kind of practice project. And it's taken different forms, but they've just been working from a bunch of Pinterest reference drawing people in assorted outfits. So that's how I like to start my day. So that's what we see going on here. And And then right for my regular thing is I actually teach, and so I teach at university concept drawing in Virginia, and it's a lot of fun. About to end up the semester, so I got a nice summer sitting in front of me to hopefully jump on some projects. And there's the sound of my dog waking up. Gets out for a morning W first thing in the morning. That's the first thing that happens every day is I get up and we go out for our WALK. I appreciate that. Hopefully it's useful to people. But also, use this morning studies kind of improve areas that I feel like are important for my students. So like character design was something I've neglected. I can draw figure stuff. I've been drawing and teaching figure drawing for a long time, but I hadn't focused that much on drawing characters and expressions and designing those type of things. It just wasn't part of my major activity, and so that's been a big part of my personal study process over the last year or so. But hopefully, useful stuff for everybody. And I've got some university meetings today, so we got that's always not very exciting. But I could start here about the inks. So, crack open my ink jar. What do you think, Bosh? You look out the window? Dog's like, I don't want to look out the window. Why are you telling me that? I'm looking toward the window, not out the window. Practicing my inking. Let's see, that sweeps down there. All right. goes there. I appreciate y'all coming in. I'm usually on here for about an hour, so I've got another 45 minutes or so for this particular session. I was on last night doing some more of creative stuff, doing some character design, turnarounds, and things like that. But yeah, it helps me to do these things when I start my day. So that goes there, that goes there. Itch. What are my thoughts on AI? I think anybody coming to rely on it is going to regret it a lot. That's what I tend to think. I see it as a bubble, and there's a lot of people making a lot of promises about it that are completely have nothing to do with the type of algorithms they're using at the moment for it. So I don't use it. I don't like it. I think I've tried. There's like an app on my iPad I tried a few years back, where would do like wacky stuff to your images, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I never used it again. And then since then, I've learned kind of more about what it does and the harm it causes to people, not just the environmental concerns or the job market concerns that people have. But there's newer studies coming out that show that it makes you less competent. And so I don't like it. We have a number of faculty where I'm teaching that want students to use it. They see it as the future, and I don't see it that way. So that's where I'm at. I've heard to go over and check over to my Instagram at Rainland Studios. I'm always posting news articles in my stories. Just funny, those get actually pretty high views, which I thought's interesting. But so, at least as far as generative AI, there might be other tools for these LLMs to be useful in, but as far as I've seen, the data they produce is not reliable. And it will actually make up sources. So that's what I think. I know people who think it's going to augment their creativity, but I think if you supplant your creativity with an algorithmic process, you're just asking for trouble. Yeah, that's really bizarre too. So there's a number of studies that have come out. There's actually one that's related to that just came out from MIT, and it talks about parasocial relationships that people develop with like ChatGPT, using it as like a therapist. But they said, what was interesting in the article though, so they said that was of course a problem. But one of the things they saw was that the parasocial relationships and the anxiety caused by them with AI was actually more prominent with people who used it professionally. It has to do with, I guess, I think as far as I understood from the article, was basically because of the changes that these systems make periodically. It can go from doing what people can anticipating what they're going to get from it, to a point where they can no longer anticipate. So basically, it's working differently, and it's causing people anxiety when the updates happen because they're not sure what it's doing. And I thought that was an interesting kind of study, that the parasocial relationships are actually more problematic with people using it professionally, even though those people are trying to use it for, supposedly using it for therapy, which is just weird. So, yeah, that was one study. There's another one. Actually, came out from my university, Virginia Commonwealth University, but it was a different area. And basically, it was a guy who studies like foreign policy and reactions to crises and things like that. Anyway, he did a study and it kind of showed that basically people who believe that there is an AI on the other side making decisions, it makes the people more hesitant to make choices that matter. So, like deciding when to launch a missile or set up some kind of defense or system or whatever. If people believe there's an AI on the other side, they're more hesitant, depending on the degree to which there is AI being used. And the other third major study came from Cambridge, and it basically says that it makes you less competent. And these are all kind of relatively recent ones. There's going to be more coming out, I'm sure. But I mean, all this stuff should be obvious to people, but I think it should be obvious to people anyway. But apparently, there's a lot of people who have a hard time seeing obvious things. So those are some major studies. But there's some other things like that are kind of interesting about it. Like, for example, there we go. That shoulder should be higher up. Like, it's not sustainable, at least as what's going on right now, because of the infrastructure cost and the power cost. Like, there's not really a path for profitability with it. Which is a big problem, right? Because if they can't generate a profit, then they're operating these companies, scraping all this data, causing all these problems without having any kind of long-term future for it. So, for example, like OpenAI, they've their last year's revenue, I think I want to say it was like 3.7 billion was how much money they brought in, but their profit was negative 5.7 or negative 5.5, one of those numbers. I keep forgetting which one is which. But the point is like they lost significantly more money than they earned, like by multiples, right? So by at least twice as much. Basically, they spend. I saw the number was like they spend like $2.35 to earn $1. Well, I think what they're hoping for, that might be part of it. That's not really what a Ponzi scheme is, but what I think what they're hoping for is that by being first and being the most popular, they'll be able to eventually turn a profit. I think that's what they're hoping for, so that they're hoping that costs will go down and with scaling, and I think that's what they're hoping for, is kind of to be first and then go public. Like OpenAI is legally a non-profit, and in fact, right now Musk is fighting their transition from a non-profit to a for-profit, because he has some kind of investment in OpenAI early on, and he of course has his own little system he's pushing over on Twitter, Grok. So he's kind of pushing against that, which would be really funny if that actually worked out that way, because they're supposed to be a public benefit company, not a private public company. But they're trying to transition to private, because Sam Altman, who runs it, is kind of the villain over there. He's already a billionaire from different investments before, but right now he's only being paid like $76,000 a year to be the CEO. So I think that's what it is. I think, if you look at who's really profiting from it, or had been anyway, I think up until recently, it might have changed, was NVIDIA. And that's usually pretty typical of gold rushes like these, or booms, is that the people who make the shovels in a gold rush or sell eggs are going to be the ones that make money, not the people looking for gold. And kind of seeing that happen here as well, where the people that make servers and GPUs and all that, they're the ones actually making money, as opposed to people making the software hoping to come out on top. And there's a number of lawsuits going on about IP theft. Meta got busted talking in their chats about how, should they license this stuff or just steal it? And they decided to go with stealing it, so they took it off of a pirate torrent site to use all these books, among other things, LibGen or something like that, and use that to feed their AI. And they talked about openly about concerns about the legality of that in their own chat logs. And that information has kind of become public due to the lawsuit that's ongoing at the moment. So I see it kind of as a big bubble that's geared up for collapse. So I know a lot of people are like, well, it's inevitable. And I'm like, is it? I like this nib here. This is a calligraphy nib, type C, for inking. We got a spammer over there on Twitch. I get a bunch of those on Twitch. Sometimes on Kick, but Kick usually just like, come to join our Discord, random person that I don't know. I love your content. Let me go ahead and delete that off. And see if I can block it. It's just annoying. Delete. And come over here to the Twitch. And report. Spam. Next. Spam. Next. Block. Alright. Yeah, the bots are really annoying. They're going to get worse too with the AI thing, because they'll be able to vary their language or other things. Usually it's always the same comment though, which is weird. You'd think with they would plug it into Chat GPT and come up with 1,000 variations or something, but they don't. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of things kind of going on in the background, but the other thing that they run into with AI stuff as well is it can't train on generated work. So whether it's music or images or text, if it's gone through, if they're referencing work that has been put into AI, it starts to cause like a collapse on it. So it needs information. I've got a reference up above that's on Pinterest. So that's what I'm looking at here on my iPad. It's kind of up over there. Kind of see the iPad up there. Yeah, so that's another big thing. So if people stop making things because they can't make a living off it because supposedly these AI systems or these LLMs have taken everything and are doing all the work for them, at a certain point it's going to cause like a major system collapse. Like they're going to need people to produce new things. And that's partially why you see these AI companies pushing for different copyright laws so they can train on the data that already exists. So that's another kind of big problem that they're facing. So that's why you see this kind of big land grab for data. You have Meta wanting to train off of people's posts and all of that. But the thing is they've already trained on most of the data and it can only do so much. And there's not really like a threshold for necessary data for them to be able to be completely independent of new data. And that's a big kind of technological hurdle to overcome. So there's a whole bunch of things kind of going on. I had to become more informed about this. Last year we had a professor replace student work for a promo, and caused a bit of controversy because students don't want it, they don't like it, they're against it. And then this professor does this, and it led to like a big discussion. And it was odd because I was one of the more informed people in the room, and I didn't really know that much. But since then, I've kind of made it my obligation to become over-informed. And rather not, I'd rather just draw all the time. But I have to read all the news articles and check out the studies when they get released and all of that. I've wondered maybe I should go over and talk to that other professor on here. I look like Hawkeye or Hawk Guy, right? It's the hoodie. I'm way prettier than Jeremy Renner, right? Or something. 35 minutes in. And I like to use this toned paper so I can put on this white Deleter ink on here. I got some ink smudged on it. But this is Deleter white. It's kind of like a white acrylic. And I like it for being able to add on the highlights and things. Other papers I use too, but I've been using just trying to work on this sketchbook lately for the morning studies, so I can play around with this. It's like we can put little white highlights on his buttons that are facing up. Yeah, so it's a nice little effect. You can drop the white on there, and people like that. I like it. You know, it's a tone. They call it drawing on toned paper, and people use different things. Like, you know, I've done this for figure drawing classes or still life classes, and they use white chalk on toned paper rather than this stuff right here. But that's a pretty traditional thing to do too. You can use gouache for this. You still see like artists using this all the time, even in concept art. There's artist Nico Marlet, M-A-R-L-E-T. Nico is M-N-I-C-O, or it's Nicholas Marlet, but he's goes by Nico Marlet. And M-A-R-L-E-T. So he does a lot of character and creatures and stuff for the for DreamWorks. So he designed like all the dragons and all the panda stuff, and I believe he's still there working at DreamWorks. He did do some stuff for Monsters Inc., the original one, way back when, but he uses you know, this white out stuff on top of his drawings too. I think he usually uses like based off of the, you know, what a little bit I've seen, he uses a gouache. Regular white gouache, which is fine. He uses a combination of colored pencil, marker, and this. So he's one of my favorite concept artists, is Nico Marlet. And I think once I touch this up here a little bit, we'll shift over and do some expressions or something. Alright. Looks like the dog's trying to make his beds more smooth over there. Hear that scraping sound? But it's a nice effect, right? Feels good. Like if we were to like I also just really like this nib because it gets these like really long straight lines. It kind of cuts sideways for super narrow, or straight up and down to get thicker lines. They do make thicker ones, but try to open this up a little bit to some of the other pages. But you see this kind of stuff here. So the same kind of thing. Yeah. I'm doing it on both sides of the page too, so there's like another page up here. It's just called drawing on toned paper. You're adding highlights. That's all you're really doing. But yeah, so you just draw on toned paper. There's different kinds of toned paper you can get. You know, there's gray, there's this brown. You can buy individual sheets in a wide variety of colors. You can also just do it with black and draw with white chalk on top of black paper, which has a really kind of interesting effect as well. Let's see, facial expressions. Yeah, but you just see it's just adding. It's kind of an added. They would call it maybe an additive approach, which is where you're adding the light, as opposed to a subtractive approach where you're removing stuff to add in light. So on white paper, you remove marks to add white. Um, so there's a number of additive approaches where you add the light in. So there's this one, you're also drawing on black paper. I'm gonna swing the mouth to the side a little bit. Push these expressions out a little bit more. Yeah, so I would call it an additive effect. Yeah, but things like character design and expressions, things are something I've wanted to really improve in myself. So I've been working hard on that on a daily basis. Yeah, so if we're trying, like when I've taught like traditional drawing classes, like in the freshman year, what I tend to do is when I was teaching at SCAD for a while, which was, don't ever recommend SCAD, it's a really miserable place to work, and I can't speak for the student experience as much, but definitely a really miserable place for teachers. They're actually under academic censure. But I was teaching like these basic drawing classes in Hong Kong when they had a campus there, and you have the first 10 weeks is because they're on a quarter system rather than semesters. So in the first 10 weeks in the drawing one class, we would do subtractive methods where basically you're adding in the shadows and removing the light, so erasing out the light parts. And then the second one, we would shift to the additive approaches. So they would do like a black. I did this like balloon animal thing where they would add white on black paper, and yeah, so we would do that, and then we would do the toned paper drawings. Students do really cool stuff. I've got a pretty good collection of student work from there. But it's definitely highly recommended. You'll see it a lot on different people's drawings. If we follow a lot of art stuff, say on Instagram. By the way, I'm on Instagram at Rainland Studios. It might be in the description of the page there somewhere. But But it's a really helpful way of kind of learning to understand how to draw light. So if you only do the one like I'm doing right here, where you add in the shadows for the most part, and then add in the lights. If you only do like the white paper stuff, where you're drawing with pencil on white paper, it kind of limits your view of how light works to a certain degree, and by kind of seeing the light being added in different ways, it kind of amplifies your ability to use it and see it in the real world, in your own projects, not just in student projects. So definitely a big advocate for kind of going through this kind of transition process where you're learning how to do different things, because it makes a difference. It really changes your ability to kind of do different things, to understand how they all work together. I like the little wink here. Pressing the eye down. This one kind of goes straight across. A little bit of a bump here. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on. My thought in any kind of our programs is to focus on things that do not change. So certain things related to design and drawing skills and that. And I think there's some people I talk to that misunderstand what I'm saying. And it's, I guess, a failure on my part to communicate what I'm trying to tell people. But hopefully, I can succeed in communicating my concerns, as well as the things that I think are going to be really, really helpful for students in their long-term goals at our school. Could ultimately affect my stay here as well, but we'll see, depending on what the directions that they really want to push things. Alright, let's get this one inked up. There's I bought a little remote so I can... My main computer's off to the left. I have to do computer stuff on here, but... Alright. You can lead a horse to water, yeah. But you can't make him drink. But yeah, I see a lot of passion from the students, and so I'm enthusiastic about it. It's interesting. There's some of the older faculty, especially, are a little jaded, which can happen. I don't think it should happen. I mean, considering the nature of their jobs, like they should be, pretty happy with their overall existence. But But yeah, I think they get a little tired, or they assess students' interests as being something that they shouldn't adjust to, um, or they're seeking to kind of impose things on people, or they have a false memory of their own level of dedication, and I think that can get in their way. Um, So I like to spend, when I'm thinking about what I'm doing in my class, I like to make sure, making sure this aligns with what the students want. And then I found if you make projects that are worth doing, that is, projects that align with the students' short and long-term interests, like they'll crawl over glass to get things done. Like, they will work really hard, and, they'll come back again and again and again. To get their needs met, and so there's that too. So I'm. It's not that they have a perfect understanding, and they won't. Like, I think people forget too that in most young students these days, they've been in some kind of school since they were like, 3 years old or 2 years old, whenever they were thrown into nursery school. I at least didn't have that. I didn't go to school till I was 5. Kindergarten. But a lot of the students, like, they've been institutionalized, I like to tell them, since they were very young. And, 5's a little early too, but I have a lot of issues with the how the school systems work and are designed. But one of the kind of the principles I live by is that if we see some kind of common issue with the students, that maybe that's our fault and not their fault, or at least the fault of those that have put them in that mindset, rather than blaming them. So a lot of people talk about, the kids these days are this way or that way, and I'm like, well, who raised them? Who put them in that circumstance? And it's not that people shouldn't be, develop responsibility for their own choices and their situations, but if you're young, you just don't have enough life experience to really have that, generally speaking. Some may, but not that many, and it's hard to capture that vision of what they're supposed to be or what they could be when they've got things going in 1,000 different directions. And so I was finding it weird, like, there's some teachers who I think we shouldn't teach them too much technical stuff early on because keep them from developing their own personal vision and this and that. I'm like, well, they don't have enough experience to kind of know how to make those kinds of choices. Like, if you're just teaching them to do what they already do, are you teaching them anything when there's some simple things that they can learn that can fix their the problems that they're trying to solve? And those things really don't change very much. So like in figure drawing, there's like a certain number of anatomical terms that are helpful, and if you know them, it makes your life a lot easier. Or certain measuring techniques that I think are really, really beneficial, and if you just know them, then you can just take advantage of them, and you're not like sitting there trying to reinvent the wheel every time you sit down to do a drawing. And it allows you to make other choices later on. So those are kind of real issues that you're dealing with in these classes. What are we doing for time? 9:51. Okay. I have to meet somebody at 11:51 or 11:50, so we got plenty of time. All right, let's some white. Oh, let's get the date on here first while I've got the black ink jar open. Let's see, today is the 18th. We are marching along, right? 250418, and then pin ref. And then we'll get the put this jar of black ink away so I don't knock it over, which I've never done in my entire life 5 or 6 times in the last month. So, let's see, white brush. But yeah, so I'm dealing kind of with that. And actually, it's funny. Some of the pushback on the figure stuff is coming from our adjunct, which are the part-time teachers. I did a lot of that early on, and later on too, midway through. And I think part of it's just kind of we need more teachers because our department's really big, and so I'm out there actively recruiting people for that, and see what kind of opportunities we can generate doing that, which I think will be very, very helpful. For the students, because I think they're, that's what the kind of thing they're looking for. They're looking for that guidance, coming into school. I know that's what I was like, well, teach me how to do things. Like, there's things I want to learn how to do. I don't know what those are, because I don't know enough to know everything ahead of time. If I did that, I would need you, but I want to see, how things really work. What's the best way of doing things, or good ways of doing things that I, am not aware of. So, I'd learned a lot from books and from prior teachers, like in high school, and all of that, but it's a real challenge because the students these days have a flood of information coming at them, and it's hard to know exactly what's worth their time. And then education is more expensive too, which is another reason to kind of maybe, focus in on some very important areas. But that's kind of, this one's a little pastier. I think I put too much highlight on here, or not enough, one of the two. But probably too much. I should have just stuck a little bit in the highlight in the hairs and left the maybe a dot on the nose or something like that, a little shine in the eye would have been enough. But we are at about 1 hour, so I think that's good for this morning. Put all of my toys away. I'll close up my jars. And do appreciate everybody coming in for the morning study. Hopefully everyone's got their own little morning study projects. We'll be on much more consistently, if not much more often, now that we're kind of coming up on the summer in about a week and a half. there's not much left to do for the semester. But yeah, appreciate everybody that came in, and we'll talk to you all later. Did I draw my profile picture? Yes. Yeah, the little skull thing. Yeah, it's a little tiny drawing. It's like, you know, like that big. It's a little tiny sketch. But yeah, we'll talk to you all later. Probably be back on later today working on some of my concept project stuff this evening. And then back in the morning for more studies. Or my morning anyway.